I knew exactly what was coming the second I heard his loafers slap across the tile like smug little metronomes. I was still in the finance office, alone, neck deep in quarterly forecast revisions, while most of the company was halfway through happy hour. The office lights were low. My screen glowed with the kind of spreadsheet only a masochist, or someone who actually gave a damn, would love. Then here came Ellis, our CFO, hair slicked like a stock photo villain, tan like he vacations more than he works, and that stupid gold pen in his hand, like he thinks he's signing off on the next constitution every time he initials a document. He leaned against the doorway with that pre-chewed smirk and did the thing he always does. Scan my work like it's a Sudoku puzzle he's too lazy to solve, then laugh like it confirms his superiority. "Still playing with Excel, huh?" he said, eyes skating over the model that just saved the company $1.2 million in potential vendor bleed. Then, like he was doing me a favor by offering the insult, he chuckled. "It's cute. Real entry-level vibes." Entry-level. Right. The model he was presenting to the board tomorrow had my fingerprint on every function. The margin triggers? Mine. The vendor threshold strategy? Mine. The inventory cushion that kept our supply chain breathing while competitors were choking on back orders? All mine. But sure, entry level. And the thing is, this wasn't new. Ellis had a routine: undermine in public, plagiarize in private, then toss a stale compliment to HR about team effort while stealing full credit. In meetings, he'd cut me off mid-sentence just to say the same damn thing with worse grammar. At last quarter's town hall, he showed my graph on slide 7 and called it a high-level strategic analysis he'd personally developed. The kicker? He used my typo. He didn't even fix the typo. You want to know the worst part? I didn't even flinch. I nodded, smiled, acted like his words weren't sharpening in my ribcage. That's what you do when you're a woman in finance who actually reads the bylaws instead of treating them like napkin doodles. You wait. You catalog. You don't rant. You rewire the whole board without them even knowing they're on a circuit. And hey, before I go further, real quick, if you're into stories where smug execs get publicly checkmated by people they underestimate, go ahead and hit subscribe. 97% of people listen without subscribing, and it genuinely helps the team bring more stories like this to life. If you like what you're hearing so far, tap that like button too. All right, back to Ellis. He tossed a folder onto my desk like he was feeding scraps to a dog. Bonus acknowledgement forms. Sign it. Finance hit their Q3 targets early, so congrats, I guess. No eye contact? No thanks. Just that oily tone people use when they're hoping you'll grovel. I opened the folder and saw the standard form, boilerplate language, bonus figure pre-filled, less than I'd earned, but whatever. I could already hear him tomorrow telling HR I should be grateful while taking full credit for the entire division's success, and that's when the idea hit me. Not like a lightning bolt, but like a low, distant rumble. Familiar? Earned. The kind of idea that brews when you've spent too many nights reading dusty internal memos, while the Ellis types drink martinis and forget the company had a past before them. Because buried in my mental archive was a clause, one almost no one remembered. A bylaw relic from when this company was run out of a shared co-working space, and equity was handed out like Halloween candy to anyone who could code or forecast. The Founding Contributor Discretionary Allocation Clause. Still technically active? still technically enforceable, and all it required? A C-level signature acknowledging agreement. I looked at Ellis. He wasn't paying attention, too busy texting someone with Botox and a boat. His pen was already poised, so I added a single line. Just one, tucked neatly beneath the bonus confirmation in the same font, same size. Equity, 4%, as agreed, retroactive to fiscal year start. He didn't even blink, just signed it, clicked the pen closed, said, "Try not to spend it all in one place," and walked out. I didn't smile, not yet, not while the board still thought Ellis was a visionary. But inside, I knew. Checkmate was already in motion. The official announcement hit Slack like a confetti cannon at a funeral. No one believed it at first. Q3 bonus pool approved. In all caps, like a toddler got a hold of the keyboard. Turns out, corporate really was greenlighting performance bonuses for any division that hit their targets early. And guess who hit every metric 6 weeks ahead of schedule? Finance. Specifically, the sub-team I'd practically carried on my back while Ellis was busy name-dropping our board chair on the golf course. The message was followed by a cascade of emojis, clapping hands, dollar signs, someone used a champagne bottle, and beneath it all, the same generic memo attachment. Fill this out. Return to your direct supervisor. I could already feel the wave of faux enthusiasm coming my way from the execs who'd suddenly remember my name just long enough to approve the paperwork. Like giving a dog a treat for balancing on one paw. Good girl. Now go be invisible again. That afternoon, Ellis came by my desk again. Didn't sit, didn't look up from his phone, just slid the folder over like it was a menu he didn't plan to read. There. Bonus acknowledgement. Finance crushed it. Blah, blah. I waited for a nod. A glance. Nothing. His thumb was busy texting someone, Bay Golf or Pebble 2 p.m. No thanks. No well done. Just the slap of the folder and the smell of his overpriced cologne choking out the oxygen. That's when the burn really landed. Not from the money, from the dismissal, the pattern. 5 years in this company, and I could count on one hand the number of times anyone in leadership actually acknowledged the reason our forecasts didn't collapse during COVID, or why vendor renegotiations magically fell in our favor. Ellis used to call my projections educated guesses until he started rebranding them as strategic foresight in board meetings. Suddenly, his title got bigger and my work got smaller. I stared at the form for a long time. The dollar amount was pre-filled, generous, on paper. But the whole thing reeked of hush money. Here's a pat on the head. Stay in your lane. Keep doing the real work while the boys in corner offices take the credit and the equity. And that's when it clicked. The clause. I'd found it 3 years ago while compiling a policy audit for our now defunct legal ops team. A throwback from our startup days, before we had an HR department with mood boards and wellness Wednesdays. It was called Founding Contributor Discretionary Allocation, tucked inside an early employee equity memo written like a drunk intern's thesis. But the terms, clear as day. If any C-level executive signed a written acknowledgement of equity to a team member, verbal agreement included, it became binding. No further board vote required. It was meant to reward early tech hires back when we had 12 employees and free cereal. But no one ever repealed it. Not officially. The clause was still there. Forgotten, dormant, alive. All it needed was a signature. And Ellis, in all his lazy smugness, had just handed me the blank check. The moment I saw his initials on the cover page, It stopped being a bonus form. It became a time bomb. Just needed one little fuse. A window had opened, one I hadn't dared touch before. But now, after that last sneer, after 5 years of being called entry level, while he wrapped my work in his name like stolen gift wrap, I wasn't just going to take the bonus. I was going to take my seat. And no one, even Ellis, was going to see it coming. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Not because of its weight, cheap corporate ballpoint, barely worthy of a signature, but because of what I was about to write with it. My hand hovered for half a second. Then I dropped the ink like a scalpel. Right beneath the boilerplate line confirming bonus receipt, in the small space between line items and legalese, I added one sentence. Equity, 4%. As agreed, retroactive to FY start. That was it. No italics, no highlight, no flourish. Just language pulled directly from the old clause. It was deliberate, deceptively casual. The phrase, as agreed, implied prior discussion, a verbal contract, acknowledged. The retroactive note aligned with the equity structure that triggered adjustments based on fiscal timelines. It sounded familiar because it was. Buried deep in the legal detritus Ellis had clearly never read past page 2 of. But I had. Twice. With notes. The key was to make it look routine. Expected. Like he'd seen it before. Like I was just following the script he'd dictated, but forgotten. Executives like Ellis lived off the illusion of control. They never read the fine print unless it screamed. This wouldn't scream, it would whisper. And that's why it would work. I clipped the form back into the folder, walked it to his office, and stood at the threshold like I always did. Neutral, unassuming, a background process. He didn't even look up. Got your acknowledgement form? I said, calm as a snowbank. Just need your signature. He waved me in with a flick of his ringed hand, still scrolling his phone with the other. Yeah, leave it on the desk. I didn't. I waited. He finally glanced over, eyebrows twitching like I was interrupting something sacred. You need me to sign it now? Just a quick one-liner, I said, and slid the folder open to the exact page. He skimmed it for maybe 2 seconds. Didn't even sit up. Just snatched his gold pen from the stand like he was autographing a napkin and scrawled his name in that insufferable tilt. The same one he used on team cards and executive thank yous, like his signature alone bestowed value. Cool, he muttered. Congrats or whatever. And that was it. No questions, no clarifications, just a lazy flourish of ink that felt like nothing to him, just another box checked. But to me, it was oxygen after drowning. I closed the folder, tucked it under my arm, didn't smile, didn't blink, just said, thanks, and walked out, pulse steady as a sniper's. Back at my desk, I didn't gloat. I scanned the form, uploaded it to 3 separate drives, time-stamped the original PDF, cross-referenced the equity clause again, triple-checking that the language matched. It did. Every word synced like a lock clicking into place. He had no idea. And that's what made it beautiful. This wasn't some revenge tantrum. This wasn't loud. This wasn't desperate. It was precise. He'd just signed away a piece of the company to the entry-level analyst he couldn't be bothered to make eye contact with. And I hadn't even raised my voice. First thing I did after returning to my desk was shut the door to the tiny glass box they called my office. Translation: a converted storage room with one vent that blew either Arctic wind or Satan's breath. But it had a lock, and that's all I needed. I pulled the signed form from the folder like it was radioactive. No smudges, no creases. His signature sat there, loud and oblivious, beneath my quiet little sentence. A shrug of ink that would turn into a legal earthquake. I scanned it at high resolution, saved it in 3 locations: work drive, encrypted cloud, and an offline hard copy in my locked drawer. I renamed the file Q3 bonus ac exec signed abor v final, because corporate drones like Ellis never question anything labeled final in all caps. I even emailed a copy to myself using my personal Gmail, embedded in a doc about vendor invoice corrections, just in case. Then I opened the bylaws archive, the one I wasn't even technically supposed to have access to anymore, ever since legal ops got absorbed and the new general counsel decided policy was more agile when undocumented. Idiots. The clause was still there, tucked inside the 2013 charter under the section titled Early Stage Recognition Protocols. In short, if a C-level executive signed a written acknowledgement of equity, even informally, and it referenced any prior agreement, verbal or otherwise, the company was bound to honor it upon any triggering liquidity event. No additional board vote required. No loophole for intent. Just signature plus agreement equals enforcement. It was worded like an afterthought, probably because it had been, but it had never been repealed, never updated, and I had just turned it into a live grenade. I didn't tell anyone, not my team, not HR, not the junior analyst who once brought me an oat milk latte after I fixed her payroll error at midnight. This wasn't a water cooler story. This was war prep. That night, I left the office after everyone else. Again. The hallways echoed like a tomb. I passed Ellis's office, empty, lights still on, golf magazines fanned across his table like centerpieces at a rich man's pity party. I didn't stop. Next morning, I was on a compliance sync with our internal audit team. 15 minutes of Zoom dead air, with a handful of people pretending to take notes, while legal droned on about restructuring timelines and soft NDA enforcement. That's when it dropped. Buried in a monotone slide, in font size 10, was a bullet point. Preparing materials for potential corporate activity, Q4 close or earlier. My ears rang. They said it like it was an HR initiative. No detail, no follow-up. Just a breadcrumb tossed onto the floor of a meeting where no one was listening. Except me. Corporate activity. That could only mean one thing in a company our size: acquisition. Maybe a merger, but more likely a buyout. And if that was true, if we were gearing up for a liquidity event, then everything changed. Because under our policy, any equity agreement on record became binding and executed the moment that deal closed. And mine was already signed, filed, time-stamped, verified. Suddenly, the window I'd crept through wasn't just a crack in the wall. It was a wide open door, and the entire company was walking straight toward it, carrying my leverage in their hands. It started with the silence. Slack, normally a circus of GIFs, passive-aggressive emoji replies, and quick cue messages, went dead. The finance channels turned into deserts. No chatter, no memes, just occasional system alerts, and one oddly timed message from Ellis saying, "Q4 planning is top priority, eyes forward." Translation: shut up, keep typing, don't ask questions. Then came the calendar shifts. Directors suddenly booked in blocks of strategic alignment, meetings with no invite trail. The usual suspects started rescheduling their one-on-ones. 2 project leads from BizOps canceled weekly stand-ups indefinitely. The kind of movement that smells like something's shifting at the top. Something big. That's when I started digging. I opened the archive from our last M&A prep cycle. We hadn't gone through with it, but the process had generated a mountain of internal paperwork. One document in particular, Merger Protocol Summary, 2020 Draft V5. It was meant to be a formality, just something to show potential suitors that we had a framework. I cross-referenced it with our equity conversion policy and scanned until I found it. Section 4.2. Equity Activation Conditions. In the event of a corporate acquisition, merger, or buyout, all signed and acknowledged equity agreements shall be honored and triggered retroactively to the start of the relevant fiscal year. Any agreement signed by a C-level executive shall be considered binding, irrespective of board awareness or subsequent dispute. There it was, clear as glass, untouched since 2020. Probably because no one thought anyone would ever dare use it. But I wasn't anyone, and I hadn't dared. I'd prepared. I double-checked the fiscal year start, January 1st. My form, dated Q3, signed by Ellis, acknowledgement language included. The ink on it was legal blood now. The clock had already started ticking, and once that deal hit, it wouldn't matter what Ellis thought he signed. The clause didn't care. The clause didn't blink. I stared at the screen like I was seeing the company from the other side of the mirror. They'd always treated me like furniture, useful, silent, never central. But I'd read every policy manual they'd forgotten existed. I knew the legal bones of this place better than half the executive team combined. This wasn't luck. This was 5 years of being overlooked, of staying late and learning how the real machine worked while the peacocks at the top danced through PowerPoint decks. And now that machine was about to pay me back, with interest. I opened Slack again, still quiet. One thread from someone in legal asking, "Does anyone have eyes on the equity breakdowns for legacy agreements?" No one responded. I smiled. They were already behind. They didn't even know the clock had started. But I did, and I wasn't going to say a damn word. The email landed at 4:57 p.m. on a Friday, the universal hour for dropping bombs you hope no one will read until Monday. Subject line, Strategic Growth Announcement, confidential until public release. The kind of bland title they use when they're trying to keep Wall Street calm and employees too stunned to riot. I opened it before it even finished loading. The first line was pure corporate theater. We're excited to announce that after months of strategic discussion, company name has entered into a definitive acquisition agreement with Foresight Partners. There it was. The deal. Real. Signed. Sealed. They'd sold us. The rest of the email was boilerplate fluff. Talk of synergies, shared values, exciting new chapter, and all the other nonsense you get when the top brass is cashing out and pretending the janitor should be thrilled about it. But buried halfway down, just before the HR reassurance paragraph, was the line I'd been waiting for. Equity holders and preferred stakeholders will be listed and updated as of Monday morning's scheduled shareholder communication. There it was, in black and white, public documentation. Monday. I exhaled once, steady, quiet. This was it, the trigger. Everything was in motion now, and there was no pulling it back. By 5:10 p.m., internal documents started leaking like clockwork. A few screenshots, an Excel file with line items blurred out. Then, around 5:23, someone in finance pinged our private channel, asking if anyone had access to cap table adjustments or historical equity clauses. No one answered. Ellis naturally hadn't read a word of the fine print. At 5:30, he burst into the Slack general channel with the digital equivalent of a victory lap. "Great work this quarter, everyone. Big things ahead. Enjoy your weekend. You've earned it." He added a sunglasses emoji. I wanted to print it out and frame it for the deposition. 10 minutes later, I saw the first sign of the unraveling. Legal pinged Ellis's executive assistant. "Hey, is Ellis in his office?" 2 minutes later. "Tell him to call. It's urgent." Then again, 6 minutes after that. "Still need him to call? Equity disclosures just flagged something. Shareholder update is locking tonight." I imagined him, feet up on his desk, probably sipping whiskey from a crystal decanter he bought himself after misattributing my savings model as his gut instinct. Probably brushing off the pings like they were spam. That's the thing with people like Ellis. They assume the system works for them, not against them. He didn't check signatures. He didn't read policies. He didn't remember the tiny legal thread he'd pulled weeks ago thinking it was harmless. But now that thread was tightening. And the knot at the end of it? Me. By 6 p.m., Ellis was seen pacing in front of his office window. One of the junior PMs who sat near legal posted a Slack status. "Wild day, LOL?" That's all it said. But I could feel it. The tension. The slow-motion train wreck playing out in real time. He knew something was off. He just didn't know what yet. Not that it mattered. The wheels were already turning. By Monday, the ink would be dry. And his name wouldn't be the only one on that list anymore. The update hit inboxes at 8:01 a.m. Sharp. Right on schedule. Subject line sterile as always. Shareholder equity update. FY closeout. Confidential. I opened it without hesitation, heart calm, coffee in hand, already knowing exactly where to look. Page 3, section titled Equity Breakdown, Preferred and Class as Stakeholders. And there it was. Ellis Jordan, 6%, my name, 4%, Class A, non-dilutable, effective retroactive FY start. Just like that. No fanfare, no asterisk, no disclaimer. My name listed in the same breath as the CFO's, equal in font size, weight, and implication. The 4% equity I had quietly willed into existence, now immortalized in a document that every board member, investor, and high-ranking exec would read before lunch. The kind of update that makes or breaks careers. And Ellis? He was about to crack. Because Class A equity wasn't just a line item, it was priority. Voting rights, preferential payouts. Non-dilutable meant exactly that. No amount of whining or backroom scrambling could shrink it. His 6% just got chopped off at the knees, value-wise, and he knew it. I wasn't in the boardroom when the update dropped, but I knew the layout, the timing, the sequence of expressions. I imagined Ellis sitting at the head of the long walnut table, smug for all of 5 seconds, scrolling through his tablet with that bored upper management face, until his thumb stopped mid-swipe. I imagined the flicker of confusion first, then the tightening of the jaw, the realization he was looking at something that shouldn't exist. That didn't make sense. My name? 4%? And then Class A. He would have looked up at legal, maybe started to protest, maybe said something like, "This is a mistake, must be a formatting error." Something dismissive, loud, red-faced. And then legal, probably that stone-faced associate from the acquisition team, would have leaned forward and said what I'd been waiting for. "No, it's valid. The document was signed. Language references an existing discretionary clause. We confirmed the policy is still active. It's binding. I pictured the silence after that. No one looking at Ellis. No one rushing to defend him. Just the weight of consequence hanging in the air, heavy as wet concrete. He'd signed it. That was the end of the story. The same pen he used to scribble over people's lives like they were footnotes had just signed away a chunk of his own empire to the quiet analyst he once mocked for playing with spreadsheets. My Slack didn't blow up. No one said anything. Just a few subtle glances in the hallway. One from an investor I'd never seen smile before. Another from our COO, who nodded once in passing, barely visible, but there. The kind of recognition that doesn't need applause to land. I didn't reply to anything. I didn't gloat. I didn't even attend the meeting where the update was read aloud. I didn't need to. The signature had already done the talking. They say when a man drowns, his final instinct is to claw the water like it's air. That was Ellis on Monday, gasping through legal jargon, trying to flail his way back to dry land with arguments that sank before they even left his mouth. I wasn't in the room, but the fallout made it down the halls by noon. Witnesses talked. Emails leaked. One exec assistant said Ellis actually slammed his tablet on the table and shouted, "She tricked me," like we were in a Scooby-Doo episode, and I'd pulled off his rubber mask. Another said he kept repeating, "It's not enforceable," until legal, twice, calmly reminded him that yes, it was. They pulled up the signed form on the big screen, blew it up. There, in full 1080p, was his signature, angled, smug, and legally binding. My little handwritten line sat just beneath it, neat and lethal. One board member allegedly asked, "You didn't read the document before signing it?" Ellis tried to spin it, said it was an oversight, that I had misrepresented the nature of the agreement, said it was informal, said it wasn't his job to cross-check administrative forms. The room was ice. Another board member, according to rumor, folded his arms and said, "So, to be clear, you handed 4% Class A equity to the same analyst you called entry-level in Q2. Silence. The same man added, "And diluted your own position in the middle of a buyout negotiation." No one laughed. There was nothing funny about watching a CFO unravel on the verge of a merger. Word spread fast. Even departments that usually ignored finance were buzzing. Developers who'd never spoken to me before were suddenly polite in the elevator. Marketing stopped treating me like a help desk. People who couldn't be bothered to remember my name were suddenly spelling it correctly in every email. And then, sometime after lunch, I got 2 separate DMs from investors, names I recognized from earnings calls, people who never said much but had eyes like calculators. The first one said, "Always liked your models, glad someone finally noticed." The second, "Told them not to sleep on you. Good move." No emojis, no fluff, just clean, sharp respect. The kind that actually means something. Ellis, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. His executive calendar was suddenly marked OOH Strategy Review, which is corporate code for we're trying to figure out how to spin this without firing you publicly. I didn't celebrate, didn't change my walk, didn't dress any differently the next day, because this wasn't a glow-up. This wasn't revenge. This was a correction. They thought I was invisible, disposable, background. Now I had 4% of the company they were all trying to sell. And the man who used to toss folders onto my desk without looking me in the eye, he'd just handed me my seat at the table. The quarterly earnings call was held in the big glass conference room upstairs, the one with the dumb acoustic panels and the fake ficus that had been dying since 2018. Normally, I'd be nowhere near it. My department barely got invited to listen, let alone sit inside. But this time, when the internal agenda circulated, my name was there. Tucked neatly between Q4 acquisition metrics and preferred shareholder overview, sat Shareholder Review. My name. No title, no explanation, just my name, plain as a billboard. I arrived 5 minutes early. No fanfare, no heels, just a simple blouse, black slacks, and a calm so deep it felt surgical. Half the room tried not to look at me, the other half looked twice. People who had stepped over me in the hallway now nodded like we'd always been peers. One exec chair even pulled itself back when I approached, like the room itself was adjusting to the new map. I took a seat near the back, not to hide, just to watch. The CFO, Ellis, was already at the front of the room, flipping through a deck he didn't make, glancing nervously at every slide like it might bite. His voice was flatter than usual. That loud, braggy tone he wore like cologne was gone, stripped bare. He didn't swagger. He didn't smile. He looked like a man who'd just learned that gravity applied to him, too. Midway through the call, we reached the equity portion. A screen lit up with charts and pie slices, all in the company's signature washed-out blue. Ellis cleared his throat. And, next, we'll review changes to the, preferred and Class A shareholder structure, especially post-acquisition. He trailed off, tapping his clicker like it might rescue him. Then the slide came up, the updated cap table. There was my name, same font, same size, 4%. Class A, non-dilutable. His voice wavered when he read it. And, of course, my name, whose equity position, reflects an acknowledgement, based on a pre-existing agreement under discretionary policy guidelines. He stumbled on the word equity like it had a razor in it. I didn't flinch, didn't smile, just watched, calm, focused, knowing I didn't need to say a single word, because I already had, in policy, in pen, in silence. Afterward, the call ended with polite applause. Some people stood. A few investors made their way to me, not him. One shook my hand with both of his. Another just nodded, slow and deliberate, like a chess player tipping his king. Ellis passed me on the way out, eyes flicking towards the floor, then quickly away. I stood up, tucked the printout of the shareholder update into my folder, and walked out the door without a word. In the hallway, I passed the exact spot where he'd once laughed at my models, where he'd called my work entry level like it was a warning label. I paused. Entry level, I thought. Funny. I'd just bought a seat at his table.